My name is Hanon. I'm 80 years old, and I want to begin by telling you something about the word unbreakable that I misunderstood for most of my life. I thought an unbreakable mind was a mind that could not be moved, a mind that felt nothing too strongly, a mind that stood at a distance from everything difficult and remained perfectly unmoved by what life brought. I spent years trying to build that kind of mind. I tried to become someone who was not affected, someone who had risen above the ordinary turbulence of human experience. And what I built was not an unbreakable mind. It was a defended one. And a defended mind is actually one of the most fragile things there is, because it depends entirely on nothing getting through the defenses. And life, eventually, always gets through. What the Buddhist path actually points toward when it speaks of a strong and unbreakable mind is something entirely different. Not a mind that feels nothing, a mind that can feel everything without being destroyed by what it feels. Not a mind that is untouched, a mind that is touched and still remains. That distinction, small as it sounds, is the difference between a practice that produces genuine freedom and one that produces only a more sophisticated form of avoidance. Maybe you have your own version of what you think a strong mind looks like. Maybe you have been trying to build it in a particular way that has not been producing what you hoped. Maybe the strength you have achieved is real in some ways and brittle in others. Maybe there are specific things that get through, no matter how solid you think you have become. If any of that is true, stay with me, because what I want to share are 15 teachings that together describe not what strength looks like from the outside, but what it feels like to build it honestly from the inside. I was born in northern Thailand, in a life that gave me early lessons in what it means to have your stability tested. Not through drama necessarily, through the ordinary accumulation of difficulty that every human life eventually provides. Loss, disappointment, the behavior of people who did not behave the way I needed them to, the uncertainty of a future that would not cooperate with my plans for it. And from those early experiences I developed what I thought was strength, the ability to keep going, to endure, to not show too much, to manage my inner life efficiently enough that it did not interfere with my outer function. But that management was not strength. It was suppression wearing strength's clothes. And suppression has a particular relationship with time. The longer it goes on, the more pressure accumulates underneath. And the more pressure underneath, the more completely something eventually breaks through. The first teaching toward a genuinely unbreakable mind is this: strength is not built by avoiding difficulty. It is built inside it. This sounds obvious when stated plainly, but most people spend enormous energy trying to arrange their lives so that the most difficult things are minimized. They manage their relationships to reduce friction. They arrange their circumstances to maximize comfort. And none of that is wrong. But it also does not build the kind of inner resilience that holds when life, which is not ultimately subject to your arrangements, brings what it brings. The Buddhist practice of willingly engaging with difficulty, not seeking it out, but not fleeing from it either, is one of the most direct paths to genuine inner strength that I have found. The second teaching is that the mind is strengthened by seeing clearly, not by believing comforting things. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all. We tend to think that what will make us stronger is the adoption of better beliefs, more positive ones, more hopeful ones. But genuine mental strength is built on honesty, and honesty means being willing to see things as they are, including the things about yourself that are uncomfortable to see, including the patterns you repeat, including the fears that drive more of your behavior than you like to admit, including the ways your mind distorts your experience. That clear seeing, uncomfortable as it always is the foundation on which real strength can be built. The third teaching is that impermanence, truly understood, makes the mind stronger rather than weaker. Most people experience impermanence as loss, as the ending of what they wanted to continue. But genuine understanding of impermanence changes your relationship to everything. When you know that every difficult state is temporary, you stop treating each difficulty as if it will last forever. And when you know that every pleasant state is temporary, you stop spending so much energy desperately preserving it. Both of those freedoms strengthen the mind enormously, because a mind that is not fighting either the ending of good things or the continuation of bad things has much more of its energy available for genuine engagement with what is actually here. The fourth teaching is that the capacity to return is more important than the capacity to never fall. This was one of the most healing things I ever understood about genuine strength. I had spent years judging myself for every time my composure broke, for every time an old pattern returned, for every time I reacted in a way I had hoped I was beyond. But the truth is that falling is not the measure of strength. Returning is. Every time you catch yourself in an old pattern and return to something more honest, every time the mind goes into its familiar storm and you find the breath again, every time you fail and begin again without excessive self-condemnation, those returns, repeated thousands of times across many years, are what genuine mental strength is actually built of. The fifth teaching is that equanimity is not distance, it is depth. I want to say this clearly because it corrects a fundamental misunderstanding that keeps many practitioners from building genuine strength. Equanimity is often practiced as a kind of retreat from feeling, as if the goal were to feel less, to care less, to be affected less. But genuine equanimity is something completely different. It is the development of a depth inside yourself that is wider than any feeling that arises in it, wide enough to hold grief without being consumed by grief, wide enough to experience fear without being governed by fear, wide enough to feel the full impact of difficulty without being shattered by it. That depth is not built by stepping back from experience. It is built by being fully present to experience, while simultaneously remaining connected to the ground beneath it. The sixth teaching is that the mind becomes stronger through the practice of attention, not through the achievement of particular mental states, but through the daily, repeated, unglamorous practice of bringing attention back. Whenever it wanders, bringing it back. Whenever it gets lost in story, bringing it back. Whenever it is pulled by strong emotion, bringing it back to the breath, to the body, to the present moment. That return, practiced thousands of times, builds something in the mind that cannot be built any other way. A muscle of presence, a habit of return. And that habit, developed over years, makes the mind progressively less at the mercy of whatever strong wind comes through. The seventh teaching is that self-compassion and strength are not opposites. This contradicted everything I had believed about how strength was built. I thought harshness toward my own failures would make me improve. I thought self-criticism was the honest path, and self-compassion was indulgence. But what I discovered is that a mind under constant self-attack cannot develop genuine strength. It can only develop a harder shell. And a harder shell is not stronger, it is more brittle. The mind that can meet its own failures with honest understanding rather than contempt is the mind that can actually change. And a mind that can change is a genuinely strong mind. The eighth teaching is that genuine strength includes the strength to feel, not to perform feeling, not to dramatize it, but to actually allow the full experience of what is present without requiring it to be managed or minimized or hurried past. Many people develop what looks like strength through the systematic suppression of their emotional life, and it works for a while. But suppressed emotion is not gone. It is only underground, and underground things have a way of surfacing, usually at the worst possible moments, and with the accumulated pressure of everything that was never allowed to move through when it should have. Allowing feeling, genuinely and without drama, is one of the deepest practices of genuine mental strength. The ninth teaching is that the mind is strengthened by genuine honesty in relationship, not performed honesty, not strategic honesty. The honesty of saying what is actually true about what you are experiencing to someone who can genuinely hear it. There is something about being truly witnessed that loosens things in the inner life that nothing else can reach. The isolation of maintaining the appearance of strength all the time is itself enormously depleting. And the willingness to let that appearance down, even briefly, even imperfectly, with even one person who can be genuinely trusted with it, is a practice of strength that most discussions of mental resilience completely omit. The 10th teaching is that an unbreakable mind is not one that never doubts. It is one that has learned to move through doubt without being paralyzed by it. Doubt is not the enemy of practice. It is often one of its most necessary companions. Doubt that is genuinely engaged with, that is followed with honest inquiry rather than suppressed with forced belief, tends to lead somewhere. It tends to deepen understanding rather than undermining it. The mind that cannot tolerate any doubt is actually fragile in a particular way. It needs everything to be certain, because it has not yet developed the capacity to remain stable in uncertainty. And stability in uncertainty is one of the defining marks of genuine strength. The 11th teaching is that the body is an ally in building mental strength. This is something that purely intellectual approaches to inner development consistently miss. The body stores what the mind has not yet processed. The body holds the residue of old fear in tightened muscles and held breath, and a nervous system that has learned to be more ready for threat than for rest. Working with the body, through breath, through movement, through the practice of genuinely inhabiting your physical experience, rather than conducting your life from the neck up, releases things that no amount of conceptual understanding can reach. A genuinely strong mind lives in a body that has been genuinely listened to. The 12th teaching is that simplicity strengthens. A mind that is constantly saturated with input, with stimulation, with the demands of a complicated and busy life, does not have the space to build genuine inner strength. Simplification, the deliberate reduction of what you expose yourself to, what you commit to, what you consume, what you fill your silence with, is not laziness. It is one of the most demanding practices of all. Because it requires you to be with yourself in the spaces that busyness fills, and being with yourself genuinely, without entertainment or distraction or the constant movement of a full schedule, is where the real work of building mental strength actually happens. The 13th teaching is that purpose strengthens the mind. Not purpose in the grandiose sense of a life mission, but in the simpler and more available sense of knowing why you are doing what you are doing. A mind that is connected to genuine meaning, even in small things, even in the ordinary texture of a daily commitment, has a resource for endurance that a purely pleasure-seeking or purely comfort-seeking mind does not have. When difficulty comes, and it always does, a mind that knows why it is here is much more capable of meeting the difficulty honestly than a mind that has never given itself that question. The 14th teaching is that the mind is strengthened by the practice of gratitude. Not performed gratitude, not the gratitude you list mechanically because you have been told it is good for you, but the genuine, specific, honest noticing of what is actually present and intact and available. That kind of gratitude does not deny difficulty. It refuses to be entirely consumed by it. And a mind that is not entirely consumed by its difficulties has access to a perspective that difficulties alone cannot provide. That perspective is a form of strength, one of the quietest and one of the most reliable. The 15th teaching, and perhaps the most important of all, is that an unbreakable mind is built one ordinary moment at a time. Not through dramatic breakthrough experiences, not through the achievement of some final spiritual state, but through the patient, repeated, humble practice of returning to what is true, returning to the breath, returning to honesty, returning to the body, returning to genuine presence, returning to something more real than the story the mind was running a moment before. That return, done again and again across thousands of ordinary days, builds something that does not break, not because it is defended, but because it has found the ground, and the ground, once genuinely found, holds. At 80 years old, I can tell you that my mind is not perfect. It still has its patterns, still has its old reflexes, still has moments when the weather inside becomes genuinely difficult. But it holds now in a way that it did not hold for most of my life. Not because I became harder, because I became more honestly present to what was here. And that presence, accumulated slowly and with many imperfections across many decades, is what I understand a genuinely unbreakable mind to actually be. Tell me in the comments which of these 15 teachings speaks most directly to where you are in your own inner development right now. And if this message gave you something real to return to, stay close to this space, because the building of a genuinely strong mind is the work of a lifetime. And it happens in the small, ordinary, unsexy practice of returning, again and again, to what is true.